Okay, picture this. World War II is finally over. Cities are in ruins, millions of people have died, and the world is left with a question that's never been asked on this scale before. I mean, seriously, think about it. Before this, the idea of putting the leaders of a whole country on trial just for starting a war, that was pretty much unimaginable. But the sheer scale of destruction from World War II changed everything. The victorious Allied powers, that's the US, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, they knew the old rules just didn't apply anymore. So they came up with something radical, a totally new idea. For the very first time, they created an international court to hold a country's leaders responsible for their actions. This became known as the Nuremberg Trials, an event that would change history forever. So let's dive right in. First up, why did this all happen in the first place? And why in Nuremberg? You know, the choice of Nuremberg wasn't random at all. It was picked for some really smart reasons, both symbolic and practical. Symbolically, Nuremberg was where the Nazi Party held its huge, famous propaganda rallies. So holding the trials there sent a powerful message. And practically? Well, its Palace of Justice was one of the few large buildings left standing with a big courtroom. And, super important, it was connected directly to a secure prison. It was the perfect setup. And here's the key takeaway. These trials weren't just about revenge or punishment. They were about setting a huge new precedent for the entire world, that nobody, not even a head of state, is above the law. Okay, so who was actually on trial, and what exactly were they being accused of doing? The prosecutors built their entire case around four main charges. First up was conspiracy, which is just the legal term for planning to commit crimes together. Second, crimes against peace. This basically means starting an aggressive war that wasn't for self-defense. Third was war crimes, which covered things like mistreating prisoners or destroying towns, breaking the established rules of war. And then there was this fourth charge, and this one was a game changer. This new concept, crimes against humanity, was a massive legal innovation. It had to be created to prosecute atrocities like the Holocaust. These were horrific acts that just didn't fit into the old definitions. And for the first time ever, it meant international law could hold leaders accountable for crimes they committed against their own people. A truly huge step. So, who is in the dock? 22 of the most senior Nazi officials that were captured after the war. We're talking about the big names here. People like Hermann Goering, the head of the German Air Force, and Rudolf Hess, who was Hitler's former deputy. These were the architects of the whole regime. Now, faced with tons of evidence, many of these incredibly powerful men used the same single defense, an argument that would be put to the ultimate test. They all claimed they were just following orders. This kicked off a massive legal debate. The defense attorneys argued that in a military hierarchy, you have to obey your superiors. But the court made a historic ruling. It basically said, nope, just following orders is not a defense for committing a crime. This established the principle of personal responsibility, that every single person has a duty to refuse an order that's illegal or immoral. All right, let's go inside the courtroom itself. The trial was a huge operation, and it came with some pretty unique challenges. So, one of the biggest problems wasn't about law, it was about logistics. You've got judges, lawyers, witnesses, and defendants who all speak different languages. I mean, how on earth do you run a fair trial when people can't even communicate? And we're not just talking about two languages here. The whole trial had to happen in 4 official languages, all at the same time: English, French, Russian, and German. If they translated everything the old-fashioned way, the trial could have taken years. So the solution was absolutely revolutionary. For the first time ever on this scale, they used a system of simultaneous translation. Imagine interpreters in glass booths, listening and translating everything as it's being said. In real time, their voices were then fed into headphones worn by everyone in the room. This amazing technology, which was pioneered right there at Nuremberg, is now standard at places like the United Nations. When it came to evidence, the prosecution had a mountain of it. And you know what's wild? Some of the most damning evidence actually came from the Nazis themselves. They kept meticulous, detailed records of everything they did. That paper trail, combined with horrifying film footage from the liberated concentration camps and the powerful testimony from survivors, it was just overwhelming. So after almost a full year of testimony, it was time for the verdicts. What would justice look like, and what kind of legacy would this trial leave behind? On October 1st, 1946, the verdicts came down. Of those 22 high-ranking leaders, 12 were sentenced to death.
7 received long prison sentences, ranging from 10 years to life. And interestingly, 3 were actually acquitted, found not guilty. This really showed that the court wasn't just there to punish everyone. It was carefully weighing the evidence against each individual person.
But honestly, more important than any single sentence were the legal ideas that came out of this trial. They're called the Nuremberg Principles. And the biggest one is this: any person, no matter who they are, who commits a crime under international law is personally responsible and can be punished for it.
This was a huge shift in how the world thought about justice. The trials really cemented the idea that some actions are so horrible, they aren't just a crime against one group of people. They're a crime against all of us, against humanity itself. And you can literally draw a straight line from what happened in that courtroom to the world we live in today. The Nuremberg Principles directly inspired things like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. And that legacy is carried on today by institutions like the International Criminal Court, which continues the work that started all those years ago. So in the end, the real legacy of Nuremberg is this ongoing effort to build a world where the rule of law is more powerful than military force. And it leaves us with a question that's just as important today as it was over 75 years ago. What does justice really look like on a global scale? Thanks for tuning in.